Okay, so I'm going to go through about 2,000 years of sexuality in the next little bit of time that we're together. And right now, even a little bit faster. Just the, in terms of more ancient history, we're going to look at the ancient Greeks and Romans, ancient Judaism, and the early Christians. Ancient Greeks happened right around just before BCE and after you know, Christ, or after that time period, where roughly the Romans were in power, and then Judaism came out of that, and then Christianity came out of Judaism. Um, Ancient Greeks and Romans, what you're going to find, lots of kinky stuff, lots of really interesting stuff that we'll talk about in a minute. Judaism, the primary focus was on that we're obligated to procreate, you know, go uh, go forth and multiply. And and then the early Christians just sort of took Judaism and made it even stricter, if you will. So let's just move right along. You all were to watch this video about Sappho. And, as we talk about the Greeks and Romans, what I want to highlight is, or even all history, is that most of history was written about men and male sexuality, which makes Sappho really interesting, just in the fact that Sappho was Greek. She lived on the island of Lesbos. That's where we get the word lesbian from. And she wrote a lot of poetry, which is still considered very good. I don't know if you've read any, but it's really quite lovely. And she was bisexual, and she wrote very explicit love letters to younger women. So I want to make you aware of that. So let's talk about Greek sexuality. Okay, so what's noted about the Greeks? I mean, for our purposes, the Greeks and Romans had a lot of similarities. They both had gods that were sexualized. If you look at their religion, Cupid, Venus, there was sort of a sexual aspect to the gods. But they were both a lot more sexually free than our culture is even today, at least with respect to, for example, same-sex pairings and sex with outside marriage and pornography. They did not have in ancient Greek times, homosexual, not the way we think of homosexual relationships today. Men and women were more fluid back then. They could have relationships with the same sex, but they didn't have a label for it as a kind of fixed state of the way you are. I'm gay. Nobody would say that back then. They might have a relationship with somebody of their same sex, but it wouldn't be part of their identity. Usually, in terms of sexual relationships between men, men and other men, and by the way, this something came about, or something was fairly common here that also continued on to Roman times, and that was this concept of it's called pederasty, and that is it's when older men have sex with pubescent boys. Typically, they have oral or anal sex. The older man is the penetrator, and the pubescent boy is the penetratee. Those relationships were fine. It was considered not pleasurable. It was considered a good thing to have sex with an older man if you were an adolescent boy, and they would become a kind of companion, and they would teach you about life, and you may even go into battle with them. The person who was dominant in the relationship, now that gay men would call topping or bottoming, penetrator, would be the one in power. So if you were a male that had money and you had a young male lover, you better be the one penetrating him. That was how you knew what status you were. Some other things that we know from Greek writings: there was a fighting force called the Sacred Band of Thebes, Thebs. Can I write this on here? Excuse me. So there it is right there. That's how you spell it, the Sacred Band of Thebes. And by the way, pederasty is spelled like this. Pederasty. It's an E. So the Sacred Band of Thebes, people wrote about them like they were feared. It was a group of men and their young male lovers that fought together. And in the writing, it suggested that because they loved each other, they fought more fiercely. They were defending their young male lover from being killed, so they fought more fiercely. The great dictator Alexander the Great was widely regarded as having a male lover and even had something that looked kind of like a wedding in a public square. And of course, there was Sappho as an example of female homosexuality in Greek times as well. Okay, so moving onward and upward. Okay, I'm having a hard time doing this.